So if you're going to look at the sheets, and what we'll do is, okay, I'm just going with the category, and I'm seeing how many are returned in that particular table. Okay, let's take product ID number. Okay, I'm just taking the product ID and just counting them. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm just seeing a value of different numbers over here. Let's check order ID returns. So we're taking how many orders actually returned. I'm taking count. Let's take. Okay. We have these many orders returned in that particular category. That means these many order IDs have the value returned. If you see here, we are seeing a higher number according to the category. That means according to the category, the data is aggregated. That means you only saw 297 values when you only looked at the order ID, right? If you go to the category, the order ID can be replicating. I mean that you will have duplicates in, it might go to different categories. So data is actually aggregated according to the category in here. And in the category, the order ID which is already counted in the furniture can be the case inside the office supplies also. So you are seeing an increased number over here, and it is showing according to the category. And if you want to segregate the number according to the subcategory, you will see a different number again. That means is that order ID, in that order ID, you do have different products inside there, and all the products can be inside in this, and the order IDs are related to that. So each order ID, if order ID is related to bookcases, the same order ID is related to art, this will be counted in here and also in here. That's why you're seeing a spike in the number. So always remember, it will be mostly based upon the data aggregation. Whatever you throw it here in the view, your numbers will change. That means you will have duplicate values inside the order ID. Each order ID looks up to one particular ID and brings up a duplicate also if the order ID is repeating in the first table. So this number is completely based upon the scenario where you are adding the dimensions into your view, and each one will be checked on each subcategory or category of whatever you throw inside this view. So this is how it looks like whenever you add the returns part into the left join, and you see the numbers in here like this, right? So we will also see all the other three joins and how they work in this scenario. Okay, we have got 297. So these are the basic. So these are the numbers we are seeing, right? Let's go back and change it to a right join. Let's see how the right join will bring up the data for us. Okay, I just click on this, right? I'm not changing the clause because it has to be the same. And I'll go back to my sheet. If you see here, there is a change in number, right? That's totally because you change the clause to this. And if you see here, you're not seeing any nulls in the order ID which are coming from returns. That means the table works in this way: all the data from the right and whatever is mapped from the left. That means you will not have the null values in the right table, but you will have the null values in the left table. Let's see how we are seeing this order ID from the left table. Okay, everything is matched. That means whatever is there in the right table is mapping up with the left table. That's why we're not seeing any nulls in the order ID. It should be the same, right? Whatever you ordered can only be returned. You can't return a value which is not there in the orders at all, right? So this one will not show you any nulls in the left table. That means whatever product has been returned, the order ID should be there in our main table. Everything will be mapped. and this one will not show any nulls in the left table, and whatever there is in the right table will be mapped in this scenario. But the values in here change. That means you're not bringing up everything on the left table and you're only bringing up something from the right table. It will decrease the amount of rows and the amount of the duplication. That will show you a decreased number of values. So it can be not the case in all the scenarios. So I'm just trying to explain how these joins will work and how your data flow will be when you're working with the different joins. Okay, let's also look at how our data looks like. Okay, I will just remove the subcategory and look at the values. These are the values I am seeing, and I wanted to see these values whenever I'm working with a different kind of join. We have looked at the left join, we also looked at the right join. Let's look at the inner join. Same thing, same clause. Okay, and I'm going to my sheet. Okay, there is no difference in the inner join and the right join. That means only the mapped content from the right join will be there in the left join, which will be the same scenario of working for this case in the inner join. I already discussed that about that, right? Whatever the order is placed can only be returned. So whatever data we have in the right table should be there in the left table. That means whenever you join the inner one, it only brings up the left join and the right join mapping content, right? So whatever is there in the right join is mapped up to the left join. In this case scenario, it exactly works like a right join. The inner join and right join will exactly work like the same. So these are the different scenarios you will be working on where you're actually seeing the same data flow with different joins. This can be the case wherever you can go with a different kind of join, and also you can try even with the different joins, but the result can be the same because the data is like that. And you have to understand the data very well to understand this kind of joins. We will also see how the outer data will look like, outer join. So basically, outer join should bring up all the values from the left join and all the values from the right join. Okay, let's just guess how this is related to in all the other three joins. Do you have an idea of how it is going to work? Do you have any answer of how exactly the table will be? If you wanted to tell one kind of join in this scenario, how the outer join will work, what join are you going to pick at? Like we just saw that inner join and the right join actually resulted with the same numbers. So I'm just asking you how your outer join will work in this scenario. Do you have anything in mind in these three tables? Like it will be going to work like that. Okay. So just think that, okay, we have everything from the left table and we have everything from the right table. So outer join is bringing up all the content from the left join and also the right join. Let's see how it is going to work. I just had the idea of how it is going to be in these three tables. I'm just giving you some time to guess on how this will result when you compare it with these three tables. This will be going to result in one kind of join in this three, exactly the same result from this three, and that will be a left join because all the content from the right is already there in the left. So all the content in the left will be thrown and all the content in the right will be thrown. That means it exactly works like a left join. If you go here, the values here, you see, this is exactly throwing how your left join is working. That is because you have all the return values in the right, you have all those products in the left join. And the scenario, it will bring up all the content from the left join, all the content from the right join. And we already know whatever should be there in the return value will be there in the left join. So this one will exactly work like a left join. So this is not the case scenario for everything, but you need to understand how the data is joining and where we are getting nulls, etc. That's why I'm just stressing on the point of how the data should be looking and how the data will be coming up into your canvas. we looked at how we are going to join in Tableau and what joins do we have in Tableau and how the data is flowing whenever you join tables inside Tableau, right? So if you have this physical tables joins are right now called as physical tables, and if you just click across over here, this entire physical table will be one logical layer. If you see here, you'll see a Venn diagram. So if you see here, this one is a physical table. And if you just click on the cross mark, it will go out and it will show you this relationship table. We call it as a relationship in the main thing. And if you just double click on it, hover on the table here, that Venn diagram shows that this is a logical table. And if you do have some tables inside, and this is if you double click on it, you can actually see this tables. If you hover on it, it will throw you the data there. But if you see here, we call it as physical tables. And if you want to add some extract filters whenever you're working on the physical tables, remember that you have the two tables content over here. You are seeing two table contents, whatever columns you have inside the two tables. You can see here order ID returns is already there, return data is already there. So whenever you're adding some kind of filter on the first table, let's say category, and I just want to see furniture and clicks on OK. If this table completely will bring only category, right? So only the category rows will look up for the return value. So this complete table will only contain particular set of data, and that one will go look up for this return value. The entire set of data is not there, and you will see some eliminated rows from the return table because there is a filter working out in the first table. This will change the entire shape of your join. Okay, whenever you are joining the data, if you're keeping a filter over here, just remember that this will completely change the table's content. Only the data picked up from this table, that means the category content, will only be looking for the returns. All the other values which are mapping with the other content. Let's say we only selected furniture as a category. We do have two other values inside category, right? That values will not be looked at the written table at all. Like it will only look at the furniture data. And that furniture data will go into here. It will look up for that order ID and it will pick up the written database. But you should be like so careful whenever you're using the filters, whenever you're making the joins. Also, it is advisable not to keep filters whenever you're joining because it might not look up the entire content, right? It only look up with particular content. So whenever you're working on this, make 100% sure that this is how you want it to be. Okay. Otherwise, do not go with the filters whenever there is a join. And you can go for the filters, but you need to understand this is the process it does at the back end, and you have to be sure that okay, I need this. And I will also as we are covering the joins, I will also talk about cross data joins. I already showed you how we are going to add cross data joins, and I'm just bringing up one more file. This is a Superstore sample file. You will get it in Tableau. Whenever you download a Tableau, you will automatically get this file in the Tableau content because this is inbuilt inside Tableau. Okay. So in the Superstore file, I also have users data, and this is a cross database join because the first one is coming from one different Excel sheet and second one is coming from the different Excel sheet. And I'm just dragging a table from this different Excel sheet. If you see here, we're adding the third table. Whenever you're adding a third table, or whenever you're adding a fourth, or whenever you're adding a fifth, there can be different kinds of joins. So if you see here, this automatically picked up region from the full data with the region from the users. But you can also join this with the returns. If you want to join that with the return value, it should have the same column. Let's check if it has the same column. Okay, we do not have the same column. If it has the same column like order ID in the users also, this will look like this straight line. From the data from full data is connected to returns. The data from returns is connected to users. This is how it look like. Okay, but as we do not have that column, we'll go with whatever Tableau has proposed as region, and it is coming from the first table, full data. You can see all the columns coming up here. If you select the column from the full data, it will show, okay, the line is coming up from here. If you select some other column in the second table, the line will come up here. So this will join the data based upon the region, and we can now see the region users as well. If you want to look at the data, how a user's data is looking like, see here, we have region and we have the manager who is for that region. You go inside, we will get a new column with the name manager. Let's check region. We are taking the region from full data and we're taking the manager from the user's data. Let's see how it is going to blend. So if you see here, the joined data came up like, I can see the region's manager. I can take the region from the first one and I can see who is the manager for that particular region. So this is how you use the cross data joins, and you can bring different kinds of tables from different joins. You can even connect to different table from the third table also, and you can look at, okay, manager according to the country, let's say United States, and according to the state. So we will see who is the manager for different states here, because it is completely coming based upon the region, and all this region is going to only these states. We will see according to it. Just remove this country. And if you see here, we have different managers according to the state, which is coming from the user table and which is coming from a cross database join. And you can use the same thing for your views as well. I will also show you of how you can use a calculation. We already know that we can use a calculation in the join. Let's write calculation to join different content. Okay, let's take one column where we can write this calculation. We do have, okay, we do have customer name, right? Okay, we don't have the customer name in the second. We only have order ID clause here. Okay, I will just take the order ID and I will write a join calculation saying that, okay, I'm only taking my who are coming in the order ID. I only wanted to join them on based upon the last 1 to 6 values. Order ID 6. That means the last 6 values. I'm saying okay, and I'm taking the write off, because I'm just showing you an explanation of where you can write a calculation. Because we have the direct column here, it is not necessary, but I just wanted to show you how we can do that. Okay, so this will take the last 6 IDs, and if you want to see how the data looks like, so this will bring up, as we join the left data, this will bring up all the 290 rows, the data already joined, but we used a clause saying that, okay, you should only look at the last 5 numbers. And this actually, let's remove this for now. And this went up for a joining clause. Okay, my I wanted to look at the last 5 values of order ID, and then I went to the written tables. I looked at the order ID column, and I only took up the last 5 of that particular order returns from there. And this will bring up the data exactly the same how we did before. We have a same order ID, but we wanted to try a calculation here. And if you look at here, I just removed the users table, right? But we use the manager inside somewhere here in some sheet. See, because I removed the table, it did not recognize the column name from the data, and it threw an error over there. It also shows that, okay, this column, I cannot see it in the field manager, does not exist in the database. That means you need to check the data where it is the column is coming from, and you need to add that column to view that particularly. It will also show the same on the main page itself. You see here, this is showing a red mark in here. You can remove the column directly from here saying delete. Okay. And there is one more option to look at what is a table name and what is a column name, etc. If you see here in this vertical presentation, if you just click on this icon, the column names are displayed in the right, and it also show you the table name here and the exact remote field name, and that exact name if that is coming from the Excel sheet. If you just rename it, you can see the exact name here. It will see the different table names. Right now we have full data and we have returns. So it is saying two different names over here under the name table. So it is saying, okay, you have two columns coming up from this table, and these are those two columns. You can quickly verify the column names in this table here, and you can check up the data. What is the data inside in here? So these are the some safety points you have to go through, and some clauses like you can't join a published data source, and you can't make a new table to a published data source. But in here, if you want to add a join in the published data source, open the published data source, go to the editing data source page, and add a table over there. This is one clause in the joining where you need to understand that you can't use that inside. And also remember, you need to have one common column. Otherwise, you can't join anything. You need to have one common column between these two tables to join them and bring up the data. These are the main things you need to remember, and use only filters whenever whenever there is an absolute need and you're completely sure about the data, and you can use the filters inside the joins. But we can use filters in relationships, and which will be separate tables. This one will create an entire one table, but if you add a relationship, everything which is in the logical layer will be one table, and the physical layer will be in one table. We will discuss in deeper depth about this in the coming sessions. We already discussed about what is a physical table, which is join, and we will discuss about logical tables, which are relationships. So what is blending? Unlike relationships or joins, blending never combines the data. They do not truly combine the data. Instead, blends require each data source independently. The querying of the data source will be completely independent. So the results are aggregated to that appropriate levels, and the results are presented visually together in the view. That means you do not have to join the data completely. As you already saw in joins, the data is completely joined, and you can see all the columns and the rows combined inside the data, and it will bring up one particular table into the view. And if you see the blending, it will not join the data. It will never truly combine the data, but it will bring up each table differently into the view. Whenever there is a need for that particular blending only, you can blend the data in that particular view. So your entire table is not joined, it is at the sheet level. So the blending is actually established at the sheet level. So you can use multiple data sources for blending, and results are actually aggregated based upon the column whatever you are blending upon. And if you are blending on a particular column in one view, in that view your result is basically from that blending column, right? But whenever you go to a different view and you blend on a different column, you will see a blending result which is aggregated at that level. That means you can actually blend at different levels and different sheets. They are not properly joined, right? So you get to see everything inside each table, and you can blend on one particular column in one sheet which is useful only for that sheet, and you can go with the other blending column in a different sheet. So data blending is particularly useful whenever the blend relationship, that means the linking fields need to be different in different sheets, or whenever you're combining published data sources. And you can use it at a different level because all the published tables will be having all the data inside. It will not take only the mapped values or throw any nulls kind of data. You will have the entire table, and whenever there is a need to blend, then only you can blend. If you see here in this image, we are actually blending upon the orders table. I just take it as a reference value. If you see here, the first one is coming as blue mark, and the second one is coming and in the orange table. And if you see here, the secondary data source will have linking marks. We will actually look into that in a deeper level. Blue tick mark indicates that this is the primary data source. That's just basically saying that, okay, you just connected this data source first. That is called primary data source. And the field used will have this indication, blue indication. And if you see here, the primary data source has a blue tick mark, and the orange one is called secondary data source. And the field used can be having an orange tick mark. If you see this sample below in this particular image, the first one is blue and the second one is orange. It says that the first one is primary and the second one is secondary. And if you use one column from the first table, that is primary table, in this scenario, I just used sum of number of records from the first table. That will not have any column because it is coming from the primary source. And if I use some other column in the secondary data source, that means I took the country column from the secondary data source. It will show here saying that, okay, this one is coming from the secondary data source. It will throw you a symbol with this data cylindrical icon and the orange tick mark saying that, okay, this is coming from your secondary data source. And if you want to see whether the data is blended or not, you can see the linking mark over here, the orange link mark. If it is grayed out, that means the data is not linked. And if you see a red, orange one, orangish red, and the linking symbol is actually linked, that means the data is linked. So these are the basic things we have to remember whenever we are joining data. So in the blending data, in the blending concept only, we have a concept called relationships. This relationships is completely different from the relationship we have on the main data source canvas. So in the blending concept, if the field is not recognized, let's say you have a one field with a name category in the first table, and the second table you have the category some category numbers or something, but category field, let's say category field, it is written as category field. So Tableau will not recognize that these two are the same fields, right? In this scenario, you might have to say to Tableau that, okay, you need to understand that these two columns are same. Then you have to go to the data, go with the blend relationships, edit blend relationships, then you can manually map the column name And that it is like saying Tableau that okay, you have a different name, but these two columns are the same. It contains the same data inside, and I'm 100% sure I can blend the data based upon that column. I say that inside the relationship. So Tableau has this default function where it can recognize all the columns with the same names. So in this scenario, in the right image, you see from the first column, you say it is from the first data source and primary data source, and the second column is from the secondary data source. It is saying that, okay, the order date, ship date, etc. has the same content inside, and these can be the possible blending options you have. It will automatically recognize them and it will throw a linking icon whenever you see it on the dashboard. Inside, what is happening is in this blend relationships, all these column names will be listed out. So these columns are actually matching. It has the same column name, it has the same content, and these can be matching because it has the same value inside. Something like that. It recognizes the column names and it automatically blends the data at the backend. It will give you the link option on the main dashboard. If you do not see a link option and if you want to blend the data based upon some column which we are not seeing, you can go to this edit blend relationships and you can add the new column over here. So this is the relationship concept inside the blending. So we saw joining and we are discussing about blending. So what is the main difference between these two? It's basically joining the data, right? So what is joining? Combining data between two or more tables from the same data source. And what is blending? Combining data between two or more data sources. I mean, it can be from a different data source as well. And joining will work at the data source level. That means whenever you join two tables, these two tables will be combined completely. And you have to use the data, whatever the joined data, completely inside your views. Whenever you're using blending, these two are not completely joined. They only be joined at your view level. If you click on that red link icon only, your data will be blended. That means you can use this data for your views based upon the blending. You can pick up some columns from the other data sources, other tables, etc. Okay, let's see how we can do this in Tableau. So for this, I will take two different sheets. Okay, and remove this. Remove. I'm also removing this. Okay, so I'm taking one sheet. We do not have a content differently, like we will be explaining the same thing in our practice file. So I will take one sheet from the practice file which says corporate and consumer. Okay, and whenever you're working on blending, remember that you have to add a new data source from here, but not here. Let's go to the data and new data source, Excel file, the same file, and I will say I just selected consumer and corporate. Right now I'm selecting home office. We know that these have the same columns, and we know that this will actually give us the same data whenever you blend upon, right? And what we right now did is we took corporate and consumer and corporate file from the practice file from the one data source, and we also added a new data source, took the same file, but this time I took the home office. And what I did, I just added the new data source from here. That means it will add the data source as a completely new one. If you just add here, you will get a new data source in this place where you can use for join. But if you're going with the blending, add the data source from here because you want to blend the data, but don't want to join the data, right? So right now I have home office one file consumer and corporate one file. So they came up with all the same name. Let's check what is this. This is home office, and let's check this. We got the same content. No, consumer and corporate. Okay, we got this data now. Let's go to our sheet. So this one I'm just renaming to avoid any confusion. Consumer and corporate. And this one is our home office data. Okay. So we know that these two files have the same content, but the only difference between them is we just divided them according to the home office and consumer and corporate. But whenever we want to use a blending concept on this data, we have clicked all the rows which can be used from this and also that, right? So let's see. We have segment as home office here. And okay, I want to look at order date and I'm just going with the sales. I got the data and I just picked it up from home office and I went to consumer and corporate. Just clicking upon that, it will throw all the icons over here and it will also throw the possible matches. That means in here, Tableau recognized all the icons with the same name and it will throw you a linking symbol. And if you see something like this red mark, that means the order ID is already linked for your use. If you drag anything right now from here, let's just say subcategory, it will take the subcategory from the consumer and corporate file. And it will get the subcategory according to the data. The data is blended according to the order date. So what happens is if the order date is blended and according to the order date, whatever subcategory is related, I mean mapped to that particular order date will be brought onto your view. So this is how Tableau recognizes the same, same names. But right now in this scenario, order date might not be a good one to use. Let's take, so we are using subcategory. Let's take region. If you just see according to the region, your values might change in some scenarios because all the data will be blended according to the regions. So in this case, the common one which will be going is order ID. In the same order ID, whatever is mapped, just compare it with an Excel sheet. Whenever you blend the data, okay, whenever you blend the data upon the region, whatever is there in the consumer and corporate row, whatever is there in that particular region will be brought up and it is tagged to that region value in the other sheet. So if you use some column over here, that will be blended according to this column, but you can use any other column in the view. So whenever you use, you can see here the blue tick mark says this is a primary data source and the icons will only appear in the secondary data source, consumer and corporate. As we are already using subcategory, Tableau automatically linked up the subcategory saying that, okay, this can be the blending option for you and these are the values coming up according to the subcategory. But if you see here, is this right? Is this throwing up all the correct values? Or am I seeing really the right values? The answer is no actually. And why? Because we divide the data according to the segment, right? One contains home office, the other contains corporate and consumer. Home office subcategory should be one and corporate and consumer category should be different. And whenever you're showing the subcategory from here, it should not map with the home office basically. Home office subcategory is different, corporate consumer and subcategory is different. So whatever values you're seeing right now is completely coming from consumer and corporate. And the sales are mapped according to the order date. In that order, in that year, what are the sales going across. But if you want to look at how blending works, let's see. I'm just taking subcategory from here and subcategory from here. It actually mapped up everything. But let's see the segment. See, we're seeing a null. Because if you see here, if I used segment over here, even the subcategory is showing as null. That means the segment for the subcategories are different. And if you just want to look at the subcategories, what a home office is bringing up. So these are the home office subcategories. Okay, we have actually the same subcategories for all the fields. Okay, that's why it's actually blending up. Okay, we have the same subcategories for consumer, same subcategories for corporate. Let's look up a value where there can be a difference in, okay, let's also see how is category looking like. Okay, we have furniture, office supplies, technology for both, three of them. Okay, let's look at maybe a product name which can be different for segments, right? Okay, let's also take the product's name for consumer and corporate. Okay, I just picked up a product name for consumer for Atlantic Metals Mobile, and this product name is not there in here because it is only for the home office, right? So if I want to look at the sales of this particular product from home office, okay, how will my sales look like? So it's not showing anything. That means it is not finding that value, that product name in the other sheet. Even if you blend on the product name or the product ID, even if you blend on so many things, it will not throw up any value because that product name is not there in the other table and it will not give you a value. This is one case scenario where the blending can go wrong. Means you do not have the data in the other sheet so that it will not bring any data, it will throw a blank field over there. So this explains that even if you have different column names with the same data, you can blend everything. But if you have one product that do not have the value over there, it is in the consumer and corporate, but it is not there in the home office. That's why it is not giving you any value. And whenever you're blending these particular tables and whenever you see values where there it is going blank, that means it is not finding that value in the other table. So the case where we saw where we blended on the category column, if we take the subcategory from here, because the subcategory is the same for home office, consumer and also corporate, the subcategory values can also be coming from here. If you just drag that to the text, see, you got the sales option. This is completely blended upon the subcategory. The level of detail here is going to the highest mark of subcategory. Whenever you previous case, wherever you saw the product name, the level of detail went to a deeper depth, like it went to a row based and it looked up for that particular product and it did not find the value. But in this case, the level of detail is at the subcategory level. It will also go with each subcategory in that the other home office because we blended, if you see the red mark here, we blended based on the color subcategory. The level of detail is very high because the subcategory we have in all the other three segments and all the values under that particular subcategory will be shown here. So this is how a blending works, and As you see here, we have some basics like the blue one is called primary data source and the second orange one is called secondary data source. And whenever you are blending some data, you will see the red icon. Otherwise, you will see a link icon with a cross mark. That means that it is not blended and it will be grayed out. If you use a column from the secondary data source, it will show you a cylindric icon with the orange tick mark. That means this is coming from the secondary data source. And we also spoke about relationships, right? So if you want to add any custom relationships, you have to go to data and you have to click on edit blend relationships. So these are the relationship options you have inside whatever your data sources are there. It will pick up everything. So the primary data source will be coming up here because this one is blue tick mark, right? So this one is actually coming up here as a default. You can change on any time and you can change it to a different data source. And secondary data source will be coming up here. In our case scenario, the first one is home office and the second one is consumer and corporate. We can add the custom values by clicking on this custom and say add. So it will throw up all the columns inside your primary and inside your secondary. So in this drop downs, you will see all the columns inside your primary data source and the secondary data source. You can manually check this category and check this category and click on OK. So the mapping will replace at least one existing mapping. If the mapping size is too high because the column names are already recognized and it set each and every row already and it occupied the complete line, it will say, okay, I'm just replacing one more mapping in this scenario. You can see all the mapped contents will come here. And you can delete whatever column is not required from here. Remove. It will remove that. And you can click on OK. If you want to edit also, you have to click on edit, click here, and you can edit the relationship between them. So this is how you edit the relationships. You can add the custom relationships. You can change the data sources as well to a different one. This is where you go if something is not recognized by Tableau because of some column name change, etc. You can add custom columns, custom relationships by just going to the edit blend relationships. So there are some clauses in blending as well, and you need to remember them whenever you're working with blending. So whenever you're pulling some column from the secondary data source, this will add an aggregated value over here. As a default, it will come as sum, but you can change the default aggregation to whatever aggregation you want. But if you're going with the count D and like all accounts, you can actually select any kind of aggregations in here. And if you see here, this one is already linked up, right? What happens if you do not have any blending option here? So this will say fields cannot be used from the other consumer and corporate data source because there is no relationship from the primary data source. In the data window, you can actually switch to the data source and at least one link. It is asking to actually select one link to do this whatever blending option you have. And if you just uncheck that, this will be grayed out and look at the data. It will aggregate, it will bring up all the sum value from the sales. It will not be aggregated according to the subcat because the data is not blended. It will go up to the higher aggregation level and bring up the entire sum of sales. But if you just aggregate it, if you just click on the blending, it will blend according to the subcategory and the level of detail will be changed according to the subcategory. That means your aggregation will also change according to the blending value. So we already discussed that this will make a default aggregation whenever you're using a column from a secondary data source. This will use a default aggregation sum, right? So what happens whenever you use a calculation? So I'm just creating a calculated field in the home office, sales cal, and I'm bringing some value from this table into my calculation. See, it will actually take the default aggregation as sum inside the calculation as well. If you see here, it is saying that it is a sum of consumer and corporate sales. That means it is bringing up the column from the other data source which is blended with our primary data source, and you can use this calculated field inside here exactly like the before one. See, you can see the same values. It's like using that calculation, create a calculation inside the primary data source, but you will be bringing that field from the other data source. And inside the calculation, it will show us a dot notation, any field inside the calculation which is belonging to the other data source. That means if it is bringing the data from a secondary data source, it will use the dot notation. It will actually say, okay, the first one, the first name is the secondary data source name dot my actual column. What is the column you're using? It will show the secondary data source name as well inside your column calculation under the column name. So while working with blending, you can see some errors, like Tableau will automatically throw some errors whenever you work on different blending scenarios. We will talk about what are those common warnings and errors in this blending. The first one is if you see an error saying that no relation to the primary data source. That means the fields cannot be used from the secondary data source because there is no blend relation to the primary data source. That means you do not have any column which is same with the primary data source. This is one type of warning where you see that there is no blending option available from your secondary data source to the primary data source. And the second warning can be primary and secondary connections are from tables from the same data source. As we are working with the blending concept, we added our data source as a new data source, right? But we did not add it from the left column where we can see that add button. That means adding from there is saying that, okay, these are coming from the same data sources. This one will throw you an error saying that the primary and the secondary connections are actually from the same data source. Rather than going with the blending concept, go with the join concept where you can join the data and integrate as many tables as you want. This might improve the performance and also filtering. One more error, you will see that it will say the primary and secondary connections are from the tables from the same data source. And the third third warning you can see is cannot blend the secondary data source because one or more fields used as unsupported aggregation. So this is a like common warning we will see whenever you do data blending. There are actually some data limitations with the aggregations like county, median, etc. These are non-additive aggregates or additive functions that produce results that cannot be aggregated along with the dimension. That means if you aggregate this part, we cannot show the value if you aggregate according to the county or median, etc. We cannot show you according to the dimension. This cannot be aggregated. This is an unsupported function whenever you're using the data blending. This is one type of error you can see whenever you use a data blending. It says cannot blend the secondary data source because it is an unsupported aggregation. This is totally dependent upon the dimension you are using. This only happens whenever the dimension is not easy to aggregate according to the measure value coming from the secondary data source. And this will throw up an error saying that this is an unsupported aggregation because the dimension is not properly aggregated according to the value. And you might also see some asterisks in your sheet. Whenever you blend data, you need to see there is only one matching value. Okay, inside the subcategory, I have accessories and accessories. I should not have any duplicate values. If you have a duplicate value in the secondary data source, the matching value will not be blended and you can see an asterisk over there. I'll tell you one more easy example to understand this asterisk concept. And if you have one customer name in the first column, and if you blend the data, you're getting two customer names with the same scenario. So this one customer column will not relate it to those two customer names, and rather than showing the two names, it will throw an asterisk over there. That means the results have multiple results in that same row. It is saying that okay, in this particular cell, you are getting one or more results in that particular cell. That's why I'm not showing you the result. I'm just showing you an asterisk mark. So this is the actual meaning whenever you're seeing the asterisk marks, this is the actual meaning behind it. So to resolve this asterisk marks in the sheet, you might have to see there should be only one matching value in the secondary data source with your primary data source. Whenever you're matching it, let's check that you're only having one value. And if you're not finding a problem or if you're just not able to solve this on this scenario, just try to blend at the higher level of granularity. Do not go into a row level of granularity, just go with the higher one, like aggregate it based upon the region or maybe a category kind of. You have to go to the higher value. Then you might see some asterisks going out. And one more warning you might see is you might see some null values appearing in the data blending sources. The meaning of null values is we already discussed this in our working scenario. Whenever it did not find any value in the primary data source related to that particular whatever dimension it is, it will show a null value. And the second reason can be if they are different data types. The data types of the fields are actually different and they are not able to blend. Then also you can see some nulls in your data. And these are some of the warnings of or errors you might face whenever you're working with a blending, and you can actually resolve these warnings by trying a workaround. But there are some things you cannot do with a blending, and these are a no-no whenever you're working on blending. The first thing is you cannot sort option is not available on this blending. The sort option you have in taskbar might not be available whenever you're doing this blending concept. And the second one is the action filters might not behave as expected sometimes when you're working with blending. This can be totally related to the blending concept. The filters might not work and you might have to fix it again and again. And there is one more thing you can't do with blending is unexpected values in the field changes, because if there is a field change at the back end when you are blending the data, and if your underlying data shows a different value, then you need to see up the values at the back end. These are like there can be some values which can change unexpectedly if the field changes or something like that. So these are the common clauses, common warnings, common errors when you work with blending, and blending is a very good concept. Joinings and blendings are really a heavy content, and you need to work upon the data flow as well. You have to understand the data as well to recover from these errors, whatever it is throwing. So moving on to the next concept, we are all done with our blending concept, and we can move along with our next concept called unions. What is union? So we already spoke about blending and joining. So these are two types of joining the data. We have one more concept called union, and in this concept, the data will be joined up and down. Let's say while joining and blending, the data will be combined side by side. But in the case of union, the data will be joined up and down. So this is like merging one or more two tables. Basically merging or appending, we call it as. So the number of columns and the column names and also the data types should be the same in this scenario. Because this is a data merging, it will actually add the data below all the columns, column numbers, column names, and data types should be the same. So if there is any mismatch of column names, this one will give you nulls. In a scenario where you have one more column name and you do not have a column in the other table, that entire column will be considered as null. And in the second table, the data will be generated. We will see how this is going to be. So in the unions, we have two types of unions. One is manual and the other one is automatic. Manual is dragging the tables to the union clause manually, like you have to select the tables and drag onto the canvas manually. Automatic is you just have to tell which workbook you have to use, and whatever sheets inside the workbook are matching up, Tableau will automatically pick them up and do a union based on that. If you see here, I just dragged orders and one more order sheet because those two sheets will have the same columns. I have to manually drag them into the canvas so that these tables will be union. When I selected automatic, it will ask me for the workbook name. And also you can include the sheets in here to automatically map up the data. Now we will see it in the demo. Before moving before moving on to into the Tableau tool, we will see how the data of union is going to be in an Excel sheet. So union operation is primarily used to combine two or more different tables. So in order to perform this union operation, the number of columns and data types of the stored data in this column must be the same across all the tables whenever you're doing a union. The union operation ensures that all the duplicates are removed from the resultant table. It means whenever you're doing a union, all the duplicates will be removed. This means if there is a record that is present across different tables, it would only be present once in the final table. So right now we have a data where we have, let's say, some purchases happen in different months. So we have a May in one sheet, June in one sheet, July and August in separate sheets. Okay. So whenever we are performing the union, what union does is, first thing, it will check all the column names are same or not. Okay, and it will add the tables. So let's take this data, first table. Okay, the first table, and it will go to the second table. It will check the column names and take up the data and add in the same columns. So even if your columns are arranged, I mean, it can arrange your data according to the columns. So the final resultant sheet would be looking something like this. So the data is appended to the bottom. In joins and blending, the data would be added to the side. But in here, the data will be appended to the bottom. Okay. We already saw how it is going to be in an Excel sheet. So now we will see how this works in a Tableau. Okay, let's go move on to our Tableau. I will be connecting to a new data source to that specific Excel sheet. Remember that we have this Excel sheet and we have a different tables inside that Excel sheet. So this is how the tables are looking now. And now if an analysis is to be done to measure that performance of that store, all these tables would have to be combined, right? It has to be in a single table and you can do your analysis because you have the monthly data and you need to combine it before showing it to someone. The combined table would be formed after the union operation, or it will merge all these tables. So remember when you're doing a union, the data source for all these tables should be the same. So this is a union clause. That means if you want to perform the union, the database should be the same. For example, users can perform a union in Tableau for two tables that are coming from the same Excel sheet, or two tables that are coming from the same SQL, but they cannot perform the union for one table which is coming from the SQL and the other table which is coming from an Excel sheet. So this means that you need to look for a union where the tables are completely inside the same data source. Otherwise, this one, the new union option, will not be seen. This is only visible whenever there is a chance to do union for your data. So we have two options here, right? One is manual union and the other one is the automatic union. So the manual union, this process is like manually selecting the tables. To perform your union, it can be set in the following steps. You want to see, if you see here, you have the data tables in your data pane, right? Left pane of the data source. If you see the new indicator here, that means you are able to do a union on your data. And if it is grayed out, that means there is something, there is some clause saying that you cannot perform the union data. Let's drag union. So these are the manual and wildcard options you get whenever you drag a union onto the canvas sheet. And in here, you can drag the tables like this. You can drag n number of tables like this. So right now I just dragged 3 tables and these 3 tables will be unioned. And if you want to remove any of them, just click on the crossover here. You can remove the tables. And if there are like so many tables and you want to drag all of them at once, just press shift button and select everything and just drag and drop onto the union column. Then you can drag everything at once. If you click on OK, see, the column names are here, and it also gave you sheet name, that means this name, and it also gave you the table name, that is this. And the table name in the sheet name is the same in the scenario. So it gave a sheet name and also the table name. You can even filter out based upon the table name or the sheet name in here. So this is a manual operation. Let's see how the automatic will work. I'm dragging new union again. Before moving on to how automatic will work, let's discuss why we just had this option, why we are doing an automatic option. So if you have the data in all these different sheets, and let's say that you have different years also, and you have years according to the months, and each month is going to one sheet, and you wanted to select all the months related to only 1 year, and in this you have the option to include or exclude that, and you can say okay, you can say all the years from 2020 or something like that in this Excel sheet, and it will bring everything in that particular year, whatever sheets it has, it includes everything. In this case scenario, let's see how in this case scenario it will bring all these 4 sheets into our union clause. So I'm just selecting include in this workbook. So this will include whatever I write in here from this workbook. I'm saying include, and I want to bring all the sheets which has 20 at the end. So I'm saying star 20. So this means if you see here the matching pattern, this is the format for whatever you have to write. Star 20 is wherever my sheet is ending with the number 20. Even if you have some year or if you have some common clause, you can enter star 20, so that I'm saying that okay, my sheet has a name which ends at 20, and let's say okay. So this is how my union table will look like, and it will add all the sheets from here because everything has 20 at the end. That's why it will add everything into my union clause. Okay, and there is one more way to add the unions onto the sheet. drag a sheet directly onto your canvas, and if you drag one more sheet, if you're seeing this line, that orange line, that means it is a relationship. And if you see this orange box, that means it is going to union the data. Because we are doing a union over here, please remember that you have to check that orange box and drop your table on that orange box. That will actually union the data. This is a one more option to do the union data. You can drag any number of tables with the same scenario. See, you have like all the table names coming up. If you see here, okay, July, can add July. See, drag table to union. You have the July data also. And if you want to see all the tables at the behind, you can just click on this and make edit. Edit will give you the same thing whatever you did for specific and wildcard. Specific is manual, wildcard is automatic, and it will show you what tables you have inside this. So we have May, June, and July, right? It will say, okay, you have these three tables inside, and these are these three tables. Let's say okay, and you can even rename it by just double clicking on that union sheet. You can rename to whatever data source you want. And this one is a physical layer. We have physical layer and logical layer, right? Logical layer is a relationship, and physical layer is the join and union of data. And this one we will call it as a physical layer. You just have to rename it by just double clicking on that specific table. And if you want to go inside this table, what you have to do is you just have to double click on this box, and it will go inside the logical physical layer. You can even modify the unions by just double click and say edit union like we saw. It will pop up with the specific and wildcard options. You can even drag some more tables, or you can manually add the tables over here, and you can even do the wildcard entry over here. And to remove this union, you have to, if you see here, you're not getting the remove option directly inside the logical layer, physical layer. If you have to click on this, go outside your canvas, and in here you can remove or edit union directly. If you want to remove it, you can remove it so that the complete union is gone. So let's just do union, and let's see how the data is going to be. We also have convert union in here. You just have to drag and drop the tables here. Every option which is related to the editing will go to the box which is coming up with this special and automatic. Okay, let me check why I'm not seeing the July data. Okay, let's drag July. Okay, I got the July data. So if I just go inside my sheet, I can get everything in one single table. If you see here, I can get the day in one single table. I can get the customer, everything into one single table in here. See, on this day, on this particular day, who are our customers and what is the type they paid in cash or credit. You can actually look into it by just unioning all state. Okay, and if you see here, it will also give us a table name and a sheet name. If you want to filter based upon each table, you can do that as well by restricting the data over here. It will give you an option to select the data from each table. This is why union will be very important for us whenever you're working with the Excel sheet. Let's say you have the data every month, and every month you need to add the data in your dashboard. That means you will get the sheets every month, and you might need to append the data into the already existing data. Union is really worthy in this case. Like, you can just add the table into your data source and drag the table onto the union, it will merge the data, append the data for you. And in this scenario, just remember that all the column names should be the same, data types should be the same, even a extra space or extra character in your column name will mess up the data. You have to remember that your column names should be the same. So whenever you're loading the data into this union clause, make sure that you prep the data before in your Excel sheet and make all the column names exactly the same. Okay. So what happens if we have a different column name? Let's see how we're going to fix that when we have a different column name. And if you see here, we have the data for May, June, July, right? So in these three tables, we have day, customer, purchases, and types. I've just added one more table with a different column name purposefully. That means I wanted to show you how it will look like when you have a different column name. Let's check. We have in shortcut of customers, UST is here, but our actual column name is customer. And we have the same data. We know that it is the same data, and how Tableau will behave and you add this data table onto your union. So if you see here, we added the data for August, but in our August data, we do not have customer, but we have an extra column called the shortcut of customer. If you see here, what Tableau did is you just got nulls in this three. And Tableau created one more column with the name which is coming from the August, and it gave nulls for all the other months. So for the first three rows, it gave a nulls for the already existing tables. That means May, June, July for the customer table. There are nulls in the first three rows. And for the August, we have one more column called cust, and it gave the values over here, but it actually gave up all the nulls for the other tables. So how are we going to fix these kinds of columns whenever we have them in the data? So if I have to merge these two columns, I'm selecting the column customer, and I'm selecting the column which is cost. Okay, this one. Just check which columns you need to select. Click on control, just like an Excel sheet, click on control and select the column names. And these two have to be merged, right? And we will say right click, merge mismatched fields. So this one will create a new column with the name cust and customer. So this customer column, whatever we have previously, will be coming as nulls, and you can delete this column and you can rename this column as customer. Then your data will be ready. So this is whenever you do with a smaller data sets and you definitely know that these columns are the same, you can merge the values like this. You can merge the value saying that merge mismatched fields in Tableau. And if you're working with maybe 100 or more columns, something like that, if your database is too high, just remember, you need to prep the data whenever you're adding that into the Tableau. It can be a first case. And if you just messed up and if you want to merge the columns inside the Tableau, this is one more way to merge the columns. But it's always better to prep the data before you're loading to avoid these kind of null values. If you have this more null values, your data might go wrong, and you need to prep the data before loading it. So in this case scenario, I just loaded the August data also into my sheet, and I'm able to see the August data also in here. If I say customer, I'll get the customer names from the August also. And if you want to see how, I'll just select August. So these are my August values, and this is how my August customer is looking like. Okay, we just took a sample data, right, for actually doing this union one. What if we are working with our practice file, and let's take our practice file itself to union the data. We have a one sheet with, okay, I'll just go to the full data practice file. So this is my practice file data, and I have cost consumer and corporate, and I have the sheet consumer and corporate, right? And we know that consumer and corporate and home office has the same columns, and we can merge them. Why do you want to use two different data sources to work on the full data? Our full data is actually the combination of consumer and corporate and home office, right? And we know that these column names will be the same. So what happens if I just make a union for this consumer, corporate and home office? Okay, I go to the sheet. So my data is mixed up now. Let's see if I got the right data. Okay, something is wrong. I need to go back and check it out again. Edit data source, edit union. Let's add home office, apply. Okay, we have some mismatched fields because the consumer and corporate gave this one number over here, where they will not be identified as the same column. Okay, let's check the fields in here. Okay, delete, because we are not using the name, the sheet from returns. Okay, we did not get the data for segment at all. Let's check that. Okay, let's make the union again. Okay, let's drag consumer and corporate, go inside our physical table. Let's drag home office into the union. So we have got the table name. Okay, I'm not seeing the data. The data is not loading at all. Let's remove this and go with the union. Okay, drag union and drag consumer, corporate and drag home office. Okay, the data is loading. See here, you have to see this one as union. Whenever it says union, it will come like this and data will load. Previously, we did not see the data. That's why it is not loading up. If you see here, it will show all the union data. And if you want to confirm it, because we have the same column names, the data has to load up, and if you want to confirm it, you need to pull up the segment value and see if you're getting both the categories, like whatever you have inside the segments. In this case scenario, we have consumer, corporate and home office, right? You need to get everything because consumer and corporate is in one sheet and home office is in the other sheet. You need to get everything into here, and this one will exactly look like the full data practice file. I intentionally separated them to do the union operation, and you can merge it by taking the union over there. If you have this case scenario where you have the same columns in different tables, you need to merge the data like this. You can append the data based from the union. And remember, all the column names should be the same, because you might see like what we just saw. Your data will not load, or your data will give some nulls whenever you have a different column name, etc. So in this case scenario, just check that your data is coming up really well here only. You can even merge your null columns here only if you're working with the null values. And remember, this one will only pop up when there is a possibility in your data that you can do a union in this scenario. And while concluding on the topic, I wanted to let you know some of the working scenarios when we are doing with union. And you can use the union table in a join with another union table. You can join two different union tables as well. The fields generated by a union called sheet and table name, as we saw, it generates two more columns when you do union, can be used as a join key because we have to have some column, right, to join two or more tables. The sheet and table name can be used as a join keys. If the name range is used in union, null values display under the sheet field. If you have any range in the naming part of your table, these will display as a null in the sheet field. The field generated from a merge can be used in a pivot. If you are using a merged column, like we saw, combining two columns into one, whenever you're sure that there's two or same columns, you can use that in a pivot. The field generated from a merge can be used as a join key. You can use that merged field as a join key also. The data type of field generated from a merge can be changed. You can even change the data type if you're merging one column, and if you find a different data type, you can always change the data type from here. This is a data type option. You can always change the data type of the merged field from here. Union tables from within the same connection, you cannot use union table from different database. I mean, say you have to do the union tables from the same data source, but you can't use the union tables from different sources. So these are some of the working scenarios you need to remember whenever you're working with the union tables and the different tables from coming from the same data source. You can even join different tables from coming with the different folders also, but it has to be a same data source. It has to be some from same Excel sheet. I mean, a same data, what do you say, data extension, if you want to say, the same Excel sheet, the same SQL data source, like that. You can merge n number of tables coming from the same kind of data source. So this is all about unions. Going back to our demo. So this one concludes as our final topic, and the summary for this week is we learned about joins and type of joins. There are like four kinds of joins: left, right, inner, and outer. And we learned what each join will do to the data. We learned about how we have to use each join in each scenario. That's all completely dependent on your data and according to your requirement. You need to look up with the data flow whenever you're using the joins. You need to always cross check how is your data coming up whenever you're using these joins, and see which join is actually going well with your data according to your requirement. If your requirement says I need this kind of data, maybe your left table will have all that kind of data and right table may not. In this case, you have to go with the left join. So whenever you're using a join, it's always important to look at how your data is flowing after the join. And we learned about a blending where we have looked at primary data source, secondary data source, and we have learned about on what column we need to blend up the data. We looked at how the columns will join the tables and where you have to go with the primary and unique columns with each, and unique data, let's say unique data, you need to join the columns to get the data approximately near to the value. Sometimes we may have duplicates which might be creating some issue. Then you need to go for blending. I'm just saying that blending will not give you duplicates when compared to join. So it is completely dependent upon the requirement when you need to go for a join or a blending, and you need to check the data how it is coming up whenever you're building a view. Are you seeing any duplicates or you seeing any nulls? Then only you have to come up with the scenarios. Finally, we have learned about The primary and secondary data sources, we already discussed about this. Primary is the one with the blue tick mark and the secondary is one with the orange tick mark. You can always remember it just by the colors, where you're using a primary field from your primary, and where you're using the secondary. Secondary field will always come with the cylindrical orange check mark. So when you look at the data, when you look at the view, you can easily take that okay, I'm just using some other column from some other data source. And how do I check the other data source from where it is coming? You just have to go to the data source drop down there, and you can see the orange one. That's how you will recognize that it is a secondary data source. These are the topics we covered in this week, and we learned about so many things about how we can join the data and merge the data. We looked at unions also, how to merge the data, and what is the difference between joining and blending, and what is the difference between joining, blending, and the union. So these are the topics we are going to end with in this week.